Okay, hello everybody, and for today's episode, I would like to welcome Lorraine Ansell. She's coming to us from across the pond in the UK, and we are going to talk about all kinds of good stuff. She's got a book that she's published. She has a genetic autoimmune condition that she's had for a while that she'll tell us a little more about. I'm sure she has learned how to thrive despite having some pretty severe pain issues, and I don't know what else she's got to share, but she's got some good stuff. So, welcome to Autoimmune Rehab, Lorraine. Why don't you start off by giving us a little bit of about a 30 to 60-second pitch of who are you and what makes you want to come on our podcast today?
Well, thank you very much, Anna Laura, for having me on here today. It's lovely to be here. I'm Lorraine, and I wrote a book called The Surrender Agenda, which is basically a memoir about living with my condition, which is hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and chronic pain. I was late diagnosed in my early 40s, and I write and I speak about what it means to live in this body that doesn't always cooperate, and how humor and honesty and some small practical shifts have really changed how I've related to this experience, and even learning quite unexpectedly how to stop fighting the pain quite so much and find a different kind of peace to living with the pain.
That's awesome. I love that. So, start off by telling us a little bit. You said you were late diagnosed in your 40s. I'm assuming you had symptoms for quite a long time before that. What was your, earlier childhood, teenage years? What were those like, not really knowing what you had going on there? Because you obviously must have had the symptoms.
Absolutely. And in a word, confusing. It was really quite confusing growing up because I would have lots of silly little accidents that seemed to only happen to me. I would my ankles were knocked together so much that my ankles would bleed, and it'd stain my socks. I would just be really clumsy. I just was always tired the whole time, and I didn't really understand it. Also, my feet hurt, and I honestly did not know this was a symptom until I got diagnosed. And even doctor last year was like, my feet do not hurt. And I'm like, what? Everyone's feet hurt. And he's like, no, no, they don't. So all of my childhood has been peppered with like tummy issues. I got glasses when I was about 8 or 9 because high myopia runs in my family. Um, and I've had braces. I still have braces on my two top front teeth. Um, because, as the orthodontist said, my teeth will always move. So there are all these little comments and things that kept happening. In my teenage years, I had knee pain quite badly that I was actually sent to have physio for them, and I learned how to strap my knees up. Again, I was told this is just growing pains, just, carry on with life. At 15, I was diagnosed with scoliosis, which is curvature, and in my case, a curvature and a rotation of the spine. Again, I was offered an operation, but at the time I was going to go into the years where I was going to have some quite big exams. So my family and we decided not to. And again, just carried on with life. I wasn't terribly great at sports, but I was really good at dancing. And I still enjoyed dancing until pretty much only a few years ago. So I really understood how to move and that sort of thing. But I found dance hard. I found a lot of movement hard. So yeah, all of these little incidents kept happening, and then I was really confused my whole life until my diagnosis, basically.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so, does anybody else in your family have either that or any other kind of autoimmune or genetic issue, or is it just you?
As far as I know, I'm the only one diagnosed, but family members have displayed a lot of similar issues and symptoms. So I, feel that perhaps there is more to this. I'm not the only one who presents with some of these things. So that's been quite interesting.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about the condition that you have, and then how did you finally, after all these years, what led to you finally saying, okay, I finally am going to get or getting that diagnosis? What did that look like?
Well, firstly, the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes is a collective name for about 13 or 14 different types. My type is hypermobile, and it used to be called type 3, I believe. But this is basically sort of it means that my collagen is much more stretchier than usual, and collagen is all over in the body. So yes, there are loose and stable joints, chronic pain, and sometimes skin can be soft or mildly stretchy. However, in my case, I seem to have presented with eye issues and teeth issues, as well as just lots of sort of dysautonomia issues. Um, there are comorbidities to EDS, which include POTS and MCAS, MCAS being mast cell activation syndrome, and POTS being postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So there have been a few little things from this diagnosis and how I got diagnosed. Well, I mean, I really didn't know what was going on in my body, and I just carried on. I carried on. I would go to things would happen to me. I'd go to the doctors, or I wouldn't go to the doctors. You know, there's just a pattern of things that would happen. And then in lockdown, I used to put down my fatigue to the fact that I was busy. I had a really busy life. I was going up and down into London. I was doing shifts at a recording studio I worked at. And I got to the point, I was like, oh, well, everyone gets this tired, surely, because we're all living busy lives. And then 2020 happened and we all went to lockdown. And I couldn't go to the recording studio, so I had no work. And I couldn't go anywhere apart from, like, in the UK, we had daily walks. And I was still really fatigued and tired. And I couldn't understand why, like, walking up stairs, I would suddenly be out of breath. And I just didn't understand it. Our dance classes had gone online, so I was able to keep up with that as a hobby, but I still felt really, really odd and tired. And then that's when I downloaded TikTok and was looking on social media much more, and the algorithm was presenting me with a lot of people who had similar stories to me. And that's when I kind of did an investigation and I kind of realized, oh, this is me. This is me. And it took me another year, 18 months or so to then, write to my doctor and say, because we were still weren't quite seeing our doctors yet in person after coming out of lockdown and things. So I wrote kind of a really brief medical history and then they sent me straight towards the consultant. And that's when I got diagnosed.
Well, that's so in some ways having that lockdown and the whole 2020 COVID thing actually turned to be a good blessing for you then in a way.
In my case, yes, absolutely, because I had that time to kind of look at myself and start to be much more aware of myself because of course we were all in a bit of a heightened state, is oh no, is this the start of, a COVID cold or what's going on? So I started to question so much more then.
That's good. And once you got that diagnosis, what was your thoughts? Were you relieved, angry, annoyed, a combination of the above, something else entirely?
Yeah, all of those things and more. No, my first thing was sort of a combination of relief because of all those years of confusion. I was like, oh, now it makes sense. And then also validation because I was like, aha, aha, suddenly the light bulb had gone off and it was confirmed. And I hadn't been imagining these things because I spent many years thinking that, no, I'm not really that tired. Or no, my feet aren't in pain. No, my knees are okay. My back doesn't hurt, and kind of, I just didn't realize like I was having migraines, but I didn't even realize they were migraines because I just thought they were headaches or I thought they were food poisoning and they weren't. And then part of me, like it was so much to consume in that appointment. And one of the big things that came away from it for me was chronic pain. And I was like, I'm not in pain. I was convinced I really wasn't in pain. And then all of the symptoms and sensations I had described, they said to me, "I'm really sorry, but this is pain. This is what we would term pain. And in your case, it's chronic. You've been having it for so long." Um, and I didn't know. I didn't realize. And I went on this real big journey, and I felt kind of maybe I felt a bit cheated and a bit angry because hang on, how did I not know this? How did I not understand I was in pain? And this is when I started journaling and it just poured out of me all of I started to grieve for the past me all of those years. And that was a really emotional journey for me because I had to pause a lot of time journaling because I thought, hang on, maybe I've taken avenues and pathways that I wouldn't have done if I knew I this condition earlier. So it's a really overwhelming point when you are like diagnosed. I think there's you have to catch up on so much.
For sure, absolutely. So how did finally getting that diagnosis, do you feel like change your life at all, or did it?
I would say it was personally for me very life changing because when you are told that what you considered normal is actually you're dealing with a high degree of pain every day, that really made me stop and think and look at everything. Look at absolutely everything, my diet, stress levels, even what I was doing day to day. And I started to see everything really differently. I started to see everything kind of through the eyes of pain and how I had inadvertently, because I didn't know, I was actually probably causing myself more pain and more injury because I kept pushing through. Because that's what you're told, isn't it? Just push through, just keep going, let's carry on.
Yep.
And that's not a good idea. That's really not a good idea for me. And that's when I started to really, really learn about it. And pain became this. I was like, hang on, a pain is a little word for such a huge umbrella of the concept of what pain actually is. It's a huge field. And to learn you've been living in pain for the past 40 odd years was really quite something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. So then what else did you start doing? You started doing a lot of journaling, which is always something I really recommend. I find that to be really helpful for a lot of people. I try to do it too. Kind of the morning pages when you first wake up in the morning is something I found to be pretty helpful. And then you acknowledge that you had that pain and realized, oh my gosh, this is what this is. What else did you do as far as did you go see other practitioners, do diet changes? What other kinds of things did you implement?
Well, it's really interesting actually, because when I got my diagnosis, they told me that I had quite a high level of adaptation already, just
Mhm.
simply because of my age, because of, I was wearing like thermal clothing and a coat in the hospital where, they're traditionally quite warm here in the UK. And they were like, you obviously are listening to yourself and your body. You just don't know what you don't know. And that was a really interesting type of concept to me because, I had already started looking at my diet maybe 10 years before that. And I had started eating um, food that was more favorable to me and my tummy. Like I had inadvertently started avoiding things that were causing me tummy aches, but I didn't quite know. So that was still happening. And so then I started to iterate myself and tweak and, play around with things. And, you know, in terms of diet, what I do now is I have a low histamine diet, but it took me a really long time to understand what would work for me and what wouldn't work for me. And so then I started to look at activity. Like I used to love to dance. I was dancing 10 dance classes a week. I was doing tap, jazz, and ballet. Yeah, and it's a lot, right? And people said, oh,
A
that's a lot.
lot.
And
Yeah.
I know. But I didn't think it was a lot because lots of other people in my community were dancing a lot of dance classes. So I thought, well, they can do it. And many of them were much, much older than me. So I must be able to do it, right? And then after the diagnosis, I started thinking, oh, hang on a second. Maybe that is too much. Maybe I need to rethink this. Maybe I started to also get to the point where, I've entered perimenopause. And so it's not doing so much cardio anymore. That's what I've been learning. I've been learning to, do much more strength work. And as well, I used to do a lot of stretching,
Hmm.
thinking that that was effective. And actually, for people with HEDS, it's actually usually strengthening that works a lot more. I mean, that's a very simple, basic way of kind of paraphrasing it all. But I found stopping doing stretching was actually becoming less painful for me than when I had been doing the stretching. So so there was, and there still is a lot to learn in terms of how I manage this because there is no cure. All I can do is manage it. One of the things I had been hesitant before was to wear braces and supports on my lumbar or even like my hands. But here I'm wearing a CMC brace here because this particular joint is just really loose and flaps about, and then it gets tight at the end of the day, and my hands hurt. So then I adapted to wearing these, and guess what? My aim every day is to be able to cook my own meal in the evening. Without these, I wasn't being able to do that. And so wearing these during the day, by the end of the day, I'm able to. And it was frustrating me and making me angry that I wasn't able to do that. So this modification, it's not much, actually helps me do that. So yeah, all of these little things I started to really be hyper curious about. That's really what it became.
That's good. That's awesome. That's interesting. Yeah. And I know, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this can relate, whether they have the same condition or something else. Sometimes, you just have to make adaptations in life. That's how it is. But you've learned obviously how to, not just survive, like we say, but thrive, despite your challenges. So then you wrote your book, The Surrender Agenda. Talk to us a little bit about how did you get started writing that book and how did that all come down?
I love that you talked about journaling because exactly that's it. It was just the journaling that kind of really unlocked a lot of things. And I was just writing. I kept being in a flow state the whole time I was writing this, and I suddenly realized I had quite a lot of information unknowingly, and I thought, hey, this could be interesting to other people going through this journey. Um, and and I covered all sorts of things. I covered emotional pain. I covered, the physical pain, the adaptations that I had realized I had done without realizing. And I thought, hey, this could be helpful. And so that sort of that journaling process then became more of a writing to showcase type of process. And and then the hardest bit was the editing. That's really, it's really hardest, the editing.
For sure, absolutely. Did you edit it yourself or did you find somebody else to help edit?
Yeah, I edited it, and I did get some help for it as well. But yeah, even still, I actually then recorded it as an audiobook format. And when I was going through, I was like, oh, I need to change that. Oh, I needed to change that. And because sometimes it's not a spell checking thing, is it? It's sometimes you repeat an A or something, or it should have been an instead of an ah or something. So it's a really interesting process.
It's awesome. That's good. So then did you self-publish this book or did you actually find a publisher to publish it?
I self-published, and yeah, that's quite a journey as well. It's really really interesting, and there's lots of hats to wear when you do self-publish. It's been really good journey really to see how it all works.
That's awesome. And it looks like you also have won some kind of prize for that book as well. So that's, a really good thing. That's something to be congratulated on for sure.
Thank you. Yes, it was the Ink Book Awards, and this was, I think, is it last year, or the year before? I think it's last year. Um, and yeah, I placed third, which is wonderful, in the non-fiction category, which is just fab. And the judges were just so complimentary about what I'd written, and a lot of them said, this rings very true for so many people. So that was really lovely to hear.
That's awesome for sure. Absolutely. So we'll make sure that we link to her book. It's called The Surrender Agenda. We'll link to it in the description so people can go check it out. They can read it, they can learn from it. So tell us a little bit more about what do you feel like your definition of true healing is?
Oh, that's a really good question. And it really depends on, I feel, on your personal idea of what healing is. And for me, it's getting to a point where you accept and you surrender to yourself and be able to adapt and accept that there are good days and bad days. And instead of calling them good days and bad days, just calling them days. Kind of everything has a neutrality. It's just an experience, and every day is a different experience. And in my head, that mindset of changing it to let's see how today goes, kind of getting that flow and kind of riding that wave a lot more. Is it easy? No. I feel that journey of healing is can be challenging. And I think we're always healing. There's always a
Yeah,
moment of healing. Yeah.
sure, absolutely. So anything else that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
Oh, um, oh, maybe um, one of the ways that I've kind of worked through the pain and how to manage it is I concentrate a lot on hyper curiosity and creativity. Um, so maybe we can talk about that.
Okay, awesome, cool. Tell me a little bit about that then. How do you use those tools to help with pain?
So I'm quite a artsy, crafty person, and for me, that is something that I've always enjoyed, as well as dance and music. And creativity was basically a way for, I guess, my pain to express itself, and a way for, I guess, pain to speak to me in a language that perhaps we both understood. Um, it's quite hard. I always think of pain a little bit like my cat, who's lovely, but she's still a wild animal at heart. And even though she's 15 and cute and cuddly,
Love that.
she's very sweet, but she's still a wild animal. And 3 in the morning when she's patting your head and then, kind of jumping up and down so you can feed her, because of course she cannot feed herself. She needs you to do it for her. Um, I started to shift my mindset with creativity and, how can I use that to express pain or allow pain to talk and just be a lot more. And I started to kind of incorporate pain into my everyday creativity and my activities I was doing. And instead of because we're always told about fighting the pain and having to go into battle with the pain,
Hmm.
and that mindset just never sat well with me because I just it just made me really tired and it kind of I just didn't know where to go with it. So I thought, well, how about if I just love pain? If I try and, incorporate pain into my life and ask pain how it is and, really listen for the answer, really allow it to express itself before it starts ramping up in its levels. And that's when I started to concentrate more on enjoying the craft passions that I like to do and it stopped the distractions of life. Don't push through, don't get distracted. So I started to kind of listen much more to pain and just as a way to process, even if there was nothing but satisfaction at the end of it, really.
It's awesome, cool. So you mentioned you enjoy music and dance. Do you do things like painting and drawing and other kinds of creativity things as well?
Yes, I love to doodle, for example, especially when I'm like learning or in a meeting or something. But I also like making up here. I'm pointing up on top of this cream mug is a paper peony that I made. So it's made out of tissue paper.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
really
shall I
cool.
get it down? Let me get it down.
Yeah, get it down. And those of you that are listening on audio, the video version will be on YouTube. So this is one you
Oh,
probably
had to
want to
stretch a
check
bit
out
there.
video too. But
So
she did
this,
show it to us on the video.
yeah, look, I'll show you this. Can you see it a bit
Oh,
closer?
yeah.
So look, it's got the
That
little
is awesome.
stamen and it's got the petals.
Wow.
It's even got a little bud. And
That's really
this
cool.
bud is just a little ball of uh, aluminium foil that I've scrunched up. And I went on a workshop to do this. It was so lovely. It took just a morning. It's not that long. And then you make the petals and things. And, all it is glue and tissue paper, really.
Yeah, that
And
looks really fun though.
it was really fun doing it. It really was. And it was interesting because my brain couldn't, my pain and brain couldn't do anything other than this, and so they were both concentrated, and it was very satisfying. That is very satisfying to do all these little things. um and I just left thinking, wow, that was such a lovely way to have purpose and just satisfy my own self. So yeah, I would highly recommend things like that.
Awesome, cool, great. Okay, so I think our time's almost up. So two other questions. Tell us how readers can get in touch with you. We'll be linking to your book. I'm assuming you have a website. Tell us what it is, and then we'll link to it as well as like your bio and anything else.
Absolutely. So my website is lorraineansellauthor.com,
Okay.
and my book is available there. And you can also follow me on social media. And on my social media, I do funny little skits about pain, like from either musicals or just sharing some ideas and tips and things like that.
Cool. Well, for sure going to have to follow you as well, so that'll be great. And then the other question I always like to end with by asking people is if you could go back in time to, let's say, before you got your diagnosis, maybe either right before, maybe back all the way to your 20s, what is one thing you know now that you wish you would tell yourself that you didn't know then?
Oh, I think don't compare yourself to other people,
Mm-hmm.
because I was trying to keep up with my peers,
Mm-hmm.
both, in a physical sense, in a professional sense. Um, but how can an apple be compared to an orange? It was so different. And now I reflect back on that time quite a lot. Um, I was having to go to bed at 9 p.m. at night, and my colleagues were going to bed at like 1 a.m. in the morning.
My
And I
goodness.
and I was like, I was so shocked that they could do this, and I just couldn't do things like that. Um and I would say to myself, it's okay. You're gonna be okay. But yeah, just do you and be you, basically.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, everybody. So, yeah, if you want to learn more, connect with her, reach out to her, follow her social media, that would be great. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.